Now let's get into Brush Street Beat presented by our friends at McLaren Health System. And for today's show, we're going to welcome back Jason Beck from MLB.com, Tigers reporter. It's great to have you back, Jason. Really looking forward to talking to you today.
Thanks for having me on again. It's great to be back.
Of course. So we're going to talk some of the Tigers Classic games that are running on Fox Sports Detroit this week, which includes the 2012 team. So a lot of exciting things there. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you about the series of articles that you're putting out on MLB.com, and you're kind of going through each Tigers position and going top 5 all time. So the one I specifically want to start and ask you about is right fielders, because obviously Al Kaline took that number 1 spot. I'm going to assume that was kind of a shoo-in, but there's a lot of really big names on that list. Was that one specifically tough for you to decipher? Did you take the fan vote into more consideration? How did that go for you?
That one was, well, full disclosure, the articles I write every week are done before the fan polling. So I don't really have too much of an opportunity to take those into account, although some people have been pretty helpful as far as sending in suggestions, kind of reading ahead a little bit and anticipating what position is going to be coming up next. But right field and first base were really the 2 toughest ones for me. First base was awfully difficult because choosing between Hank Greenberg and Miguel Cabrera. And then right field, Kaline was really a no-brainer at the top. But then you go further down the line, and there were really good players on that list. It's a position where the Tigers have 3 Hall of Famers. Harry Heilman was one of the best hitters of his era, probably underrated. Sam Crawford was an incredible player. Choosing between those 2 guys was incredibly tough. And then even going beyond that, you've got Kirk Gibson with his heroics and his special place, I think, in the hearts of today's fans. And also, Jim Northrup. A lot of people don't think of him as a right fielder because that was Kaline's spot for really the entirety of the time he played, except for a couple of years in center field. But Northrup ended up playing more games in right field than any other outfield position for him. So it kind of ended up having to include him in that list. And I almost felt bad that, you could go 5 deep on this list, and we still didn't have room for Miguel Ordonez, who owns one of the biggest home runs in franchise history, as well as one of the best single seasons for a Tigers outfielder in history with what he did in 2007 with the batting title and finishing runner-up for AL MVP to A-Rod.
Jason, it's interesting. You're bringing all this up, and I want to ask you more of an overview. I'm looking at your what would be, I guess, your all-time team from position to position. And, Sweet Lou Whitaker's my favorite, but, Charlie Gehringer, who's from Fowlerville, Michigan, a local product, that's one of the forgotten Tigers. When you were compiling this, what did you learn about this franchise? Did you ever sit back and you say, my gosh, the players that the Tigers have been some really, for lack of a better term, really heavy hitters?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's been a real learning experience. I knew a decent amount, but when you get into the bios from Sabre and you learn about some of these guys' lives, and the fact that the Tigers had a decent number of players who came from Michigan and ended up spending their lives and careers here, I think that adds to the special feeling around this franchise. But yet, what you mentioned, R2, is the talent level just all around the lineup because of the rich history here. I think I got an appreciation for that too when, MLB.com, another one of the projects we've done was the Dream Bracket a few weeks ago, in which you put together an all-time team from, across the eras, and putting together a roster and a lineup for that team to have them compete against other all-time franchise teams was really tough, making some of these decisions. But you also ended up looking at that roster and thinking, this is an incredibly loaded lineup. And when you put that out there, when those lineups first came out, you even saw people like John Heyman and Brian Kenny on MLB Network looking at this and saying, look, this is one of the 3 or 4 best lineups, that we have in this competition. So I think that says a ton about what the Tigers have in terms of their franchise history in individual talents over the years. Now, I think it gets overlooked sometimes because it's not Yankees or Dodgers or Red Sox or even Cubs in terms of how much attention, national attention, gets put on it over the years.
Jason, I'd imagine that Justin Verlander is going to make an appearance on your starting pitchers list. Now, can't confirm that obviously, but I'm gonna say that we might see him on that top list, and we're gonna get to see him in action on the Fox Sports Detroit Classic games with the 2012 Tigers team. Just throw it back a little bit. When you think about that 2012 Tigers team, what stands out to you most?
The lineup was so star-studded and so formidable, just up and down. When they brought in Prince Fielder and they moved Miguel Cabrera from first to third, you had Delman Young back coming off a really good stretch run, and you had Johnny Peralta at short. You had so many good hitters at different spots. Alex Avila, coming off an all-star season there. There was so much strength up and down that lineup. And then you combine it with that rotation. Verlander coming off an MVP and Cy Young year, but also 2012 was really the year we saw Max Scherzer start to emerge as a frontline starter. It was the year that he really developed that curveball, working with then pitching coach Jeff Jones on it. And he really came into his own in terms of being, not just that guy who fit in well behind Justin Verlander, but almost being a co-ace. And you saw him emerge as that type of pitcher you wanted out there, in his own right, not just the next best guy after Verlander. And then you add in Doug Fister. You've got Rick Porcello, who was starting to find his groove there, starting to discover himself as a pitcher. It's just really good starting pitching up and down the line. But that lineup was just so I always remember watching those guys take batting practice before games, and some of the shows they would put on, just putting home runs into these seats, especially when they would do it on the road. I remember them going to Pittsburgh and watching Prince Fielder and Miguel Cabrera, putting batting practice balls into the river there, or trying to. And just the shows that they would put on, what they were capable of, just an amazing roster. And if they had managed to win it all, I think you'd be talking about one of the best rosters in franchise history.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look back at that at 2012, that whole kind of mini era. Every time like Max Scherzer comes back to town, or even JV now with the Astros, there just seems to be a sense of frustration, and current Tigers too that you talked to who played back then, that how did they not win a championship?
I think it's a combination of both. I think you look at 12 and especially the 2013 team, because you had Victor Martinez back and you brought in Torrey Hunter, and it really looked like a team that was set to win it all. Max Scherzer was a Cy Young winner. Just such a complete team in 12 and 13. I still think in 2012, that layoff between the ALCS and the World Series really kind of slowed their momentum, and it was really tough for them to come back from it. And once the Tigers lost those first two games in San Francisco, you just had that feeling of here we go again, because it felt so similar to 2006. And then coming back in 2013, I remember the rallying cry was 4 more wins, which, mathematically, yeah, you're right, but also discounted how much you would have to go through to make that run again to get there.
Well, aside from not having a World Series on the year, 2012 was a really great year for the Tigers. So it's going to be fun to relive some of these moments thanks to our friends at Fox Sports Detroit. And Jason, thank you so much for joining us again for Brush Street Beat. It's always great to chat with you, and I'm really looking forward to your pitchers list that should be coming out soon, right?
Absolutely. I'm going to be starting on that here probably later on this week. So I am looking forward to going through a lot of different stats to try to figure out who ranks up at the top of my list.
Yeah, you've got your work cut out for you this week, but I am very excited to see it. Another thank you to Jason Beck for joining us on today's Brush Street Beat, which is presented by McLaren Health System. Thank you to McLaren for bringing you Brush Street Beat this week and every week here on the Word on Woodward.